everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for sticking around for the second session. My name is Emre Pshigusa, and I will be talking about our project, Common Voice Circassian project, but I'll also be talking about the sociolinguistic situation of Circassian in Turkey. I'm an applied linguist by training. I've done my PhD at Ohio State University in the States, and my research focus is sociolinguistics and specifically Circassian language maintenance and revitalization in the diaspora countries. And my talk is titled Giving Voice to the Silenced, AI and Mozilla Common Voice for the Revitalization and Maintenance of Circassian. Before we get started, I want to ask how many of you have heard anything about this Mozilla Common Voice project? Okay, good. So we'll learn a lot about this. It's actually a great tool, especially for endangered languages. And we started using this platform to revitalize and maintain Circassian. Some of you may already know Circassian is an endangered language. Unfortunately, it's some of the Circassian languages, like Ubuk, for instance, it's an extinct language now. There's no Ubuk speaker left. So our goal is to basically revitalize and maintain the language. All right. Some tech hiccup here. So my agenda for the session, first I'll share briefly about the historical context, the Circassian displacement we watched in the documentary, but just to recap on that, where Circassians are from, where they ended up in Turkey, and the sociolinguistic situation of the language in Turkey. And also, I'll share some of my own research findings on this issue, sociolinguistic situation of Circassian, and how the dominant language ideologies within the Turkish context impacted the generational transfer of the language and the revitalization of the language within the Turkish context. And I'll end my talk with the revitalization efforts, how we use AI and the Common Voice project to basically revitalize the language and transfer it to future generations. So, just a brief history here. So, in the video, also documentary, we saw this, but Circassians are from the North Caucasus region of the Russian Federation, and they were expelled from their homeland, Circassia, after very long battle with the Russian Empire. And right now, we live in a very big diaspora. So Turkey has the largest population: Syria, Jordan, Israel, Iraq.
Sorry, can I add that in Jordan, actually the numbers are way higher.
I was about to say something about the numbers. So the numbers here, even like for the Turkish context. So in Turkey, with the government censuses, they used to ask people their ethnic origins until 1960s, right? So everybody could share if they're Kurdish, Circassian, Armenian, but right now we don't have official data. So according to some people, there are 5-6 million Circassians in Turkey. According to others, it's just 2 million. So we don't really know the exact numbers. So I got this data from Nasib Foundation. It's an organization in New Jersey, and they do research and language teaching materials, like they prepare those. So these are probably on the lower side, but I've seen numbers that are, way higher. But roughly 3 to 5 million Circassians live in the old diaspora countries. and also the Caucasus. So here you can see the area. This was the historic, our ancestral homeland. A fun fact, I lived in Texas for 3 years, and in Texas they have these huge antique shows, right? You can go, it's like for 2 weeks. They have these massive tents. They're antique vendors from all over the states. I went into one of the map dealers' tent, right? And I asked the guy if he had any map from the Caucasus region. And then he looked at me, he was this like old Texan guy with a cowboy hat. And he goes, "You're the only person throughout my 40-year career who asked me a map from that region." I'm like, well, it's because I'm Circassian, I'm originally from there. And he had one map. It was an antique map of the Caucasus region from 1750. It was like authenticated, and it had this region as Circassia, as an independent country. So it's a big map. I bought that. I had to buy that map, and I framed it. So that's the only map, world map from 1750s, where you see Circassia as an independent nation. So the language family, Circassian is a very unique language. It's from the Abkhaz-Adiga language family. And it might be a little blurry, but so this is Black Sea, and this is the area where Circassians were exiled from Sochi. So they ended up here at the Black Sea coast, Samsun, and they started going down south. So these are all Circassian settlements, and they speak Western Circassian, Eastern Circassian, which I'm a native speaker of. I was born in Kayseri, a very small town in the middle part, with all Circassians, right? I didn't speak any Turkish until I started first grade, because there was no Turkish people living in my village. So we had to move to the city so that we could go to school. That's how I learned Turkish as my second language. But the third Circassian, the language, Ubykh, from the Abkhaz-Adiga language family, it's unfortunately an extinct language now. The last speaker of this language died in Turkey in early 1990s. So that's the language within the Turkish context. But here you see the migration route, right? So first, this area, again, this was all Ottoman Empire. We're talking about 1860s, right? The Middle East, Syria. Some of them went to Bulgaria, the Balkans, and those were actually exiled again to the Middle East, to Syria and the Jordan area. So there are some research, some historians, they estimate the number between 800,000 to 1.5 million people who actually were exiled from their indigenous homelands to Ottoman Empire. And historians and scholars call this a systemic genocide, marked by mass murder, ethnic cleansing, and forced expulsion from their homelands. So now I want to talk about our language rights, how we try to maintain our language, our ethnic identity within the Turkish context. But I want to start with the Ottoman era, so pre-Republic period. So during Ottoman Empire, they had people from many different diverse ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, right? So the state was, they adopted this religious Unitarianism as their approach. So they had more tolerance towards the ethno-linguistic minorities within the Turkish context, and Circassians were given more freedom to basically open schools, publish newspapers and things like that. And in the documentary, it was also mentioned that there were some Circassian schools in Istanbul which had 100% Circassian instruction. So medium of instruction was Circassian. But these schools, unfortunately, were shut down after the Republic was declared, and the teachers were arrested. And these teachers they actually created all these textbooks to teach the language. But all those books, unfortunately, were collected and burnt down. So from the tolerant phase, now we're switching to the Republican era, where the state shifted to nation-state ideologies and linguistic Unitarianism. So they expected everybody to speak Turkish, and we even had official policies, state policies, citizens speak Turkish policies. And this area brought the suppression of ethnic and linguistic diversity. And these policies started banning minority languages, names, and cultural expression in the social context. So I call this era Turkification era of all these, ethno-linguistic minorities. So the goal was to assimilate all these ethnic and linguistic minority groups to the dominant Turkish society and the Turkish language. So the first prominent movement was the Citizen Speak Turkish movement. In Turkish we call it Vatandaş Türkçe Konuş, Citizen Speak Turkish. So this lasted from 1928 till 1945. And they would put up these huge billboards and signs saying that citizens speak Turkish. I'll actually show some newspaper excerpts from that era with English translations so that you can understand the socio-linguistic situation. And then we had internal mass deportation. So ethnic minorities within Turkey, they would be replaced from their lands. So this was again a policy, state policy. And the goal was to assimilate non-Turkish minorities to the dominant Turkish language in the society. And then we also had the compulsory adoption of Turkish last names in 1934. So, for instance, my last name is Pshigusa, but it was not when I was in Turkey, because Pshigusa is my family name from the Caucasus. So when my ancestors were exiled to Ottoman Empire, that's our family name. But in Turkey, you can't have this as a family name because it's not Turkish. No, even now, even today, you can't have it. It has to have a meaning in Turkish if you want to, change it. So it's very difficult, bureaucratic process. You have to go through the courts, and it's very difficult. But I was fortunate to change, basically reclaim my family name when I became a U.S. citizen a few years ago. I was offered the chance to, reclaim my family name, so I changed my family name to my Circassian family. So the Citizens Speak Turkish movement, as I mentioned, it was launched in 1928, and it was based on these nationalist ideologies and nation-state ideologies, and they wanted this linguistically unified nation, right? Basically by erasing all the languages other than Turkish from the public eye in society. In schools, also, you couldn't speak any Circassian, even if you go to a school in a Circassian village. Like both my parents, Circassian, and they went to schools in Circassian villages, and they would be physically punished if they, spoke anything but Turkish. So these policies, though, based on these nation-state ideologies, we had similar language policies around the world. We had, like in Sweden, Swedes speak Swedish, Chinese speak Chinese. These are all like nation building efforts, and unifying the nation around language. question?
Yeah, when did these happen in Sweden and China? What were the years that
The dates, I'm not sure what the dates, but it's from this Johnson study. He's actually from Sweden. He published on this, but I can look into it and get back to you. I'm not sure, but it's 19 probably like mid 1950s or so. So here are some newspaper excerpts that I got from that time. This is from Cumhuriyet, the Republic newspaper from 1936. So when we talk about the sociolinguistic situation of a language, so we have to look at it from multiple angles, like how it's portrayed in like education system, in the society, to general dominant public, how they perceive the language, and also media, right? So here we have Citizens Speak Turkish campaigns extending. Everyone in Gönen will speak Turkish. So Gönen is actually a town in western part of Turkey with some Circassian speakers there. So that's about that. And here, either speak Turkish or ya Türkçe konuşuyoruz. So these are the campaigns that were used in the written media. And also here, they were talking about a lesson. They punished some of the people who did not speak Turkish in the public, and they were punished. So it was talking about that. And another excerpt from the same newspaper. So the translation, the citizens are not speaking Turkish. If we close our eyes, we would feel like we're in a foreign country. Yes, despite everything, citizens are not speaking Turkish. They don't want to, and they're not even trying to hide it. They do it openly and loud. So this shows the public sentiment towards ethnic and linguistic minorities. So the research on the linguistic minorities of Turkey, there is very limited research, right? In Turkey, there are almost 40 different ethnic and ethno-linguistic minorities, 40 different languages, but people don't really know about these languages, right? For instance, the largest group is Kurdish speakers. They know about Kurds. Circassian is the second largest ethno-linguistic minority, but even for us Circassians, I would say a lot of people don't even know anything about Circassians, right? But again, Turkey is a big country with over 80 million population. But there's some research done on different ethno-linguistic minority groups, how these policies, these language ideologies, and official language policies impacted these languages. The first one is Judo-Spanish, also called Ladino. So this study by Alicia Saloni and Sarfati, they looked at the impact of the Citizen Speak Turkish movement on this language, and they found that this movement led to forced linguistic assimilation, anti-Semitic harassment, and public shaming of Ladino speakers. And a lot of Ladino speakers, they unfortunately had to abandon their languages, and they didn't transfer the language to their kids. And then Kurdish, also the Turkish government banned Kurdish, renamed towns in first migrations, and denied Kurdish identity, undermining language maintenance and intergenerational transfer. So when you have these policies where you're physically punished or you get in trouble with the state when you speak your own native language, rightfully so, the parents were worried and they didn't want to transfer the language to their children. So they wanted them to learn the dominant Turkish language and assimilate as fast as possible for both, financial reasons probably, because when it comes to learning, Circassian or these other minority languages, it doesn't have any financial incentive, right? rather than big part of your identity. And also, when you have all these like systemic oppression for years, you don't really want your kids to go through the same challenges that you have, right, growing up. So in the literature, in the language maintenance and revitalization literature, so there are some factors supporting the language maintenance. The first one and the most important one, obviously, is the supportive education policies. When the states are more open to multilingualism, basically granting rights to minority groups to teach their languages, learn their languages in public schools. That's a big impact on the maintenance. And positive language attitudes, institutional backing, and active home use when parents use the language at home, and strong identity and belief in the language. So these are some of the ones that I picked from the literature. And there are some factors driving the language shift. So shifting from your own language, your native language, to the dominant language. In this case, in our case, it would be Turkish. So assimilationist ideologies, that's number one, and economic stigma and state repression, and also nation-state language policies framing minorities as threats, or languages as threats. So I started my research on Circassian language maintenance because there was this gap in the scholarship, right? Circassians are the second largest minority group in Turkey, but there was no research on the language, what people went through trying to maintain the language. So I conducted some studies, and we published a book with some academics in Turkey. The one on the right here, reflecting on the future of Circassians, culture, society, and democracy. This was published in this was like a 2-volume book. It's a really large, I think it's like 800 pages in total. So it has chapters, and my chapter was on language maintenance, and basically taking this socio-historical perspective, how we maintain the language. It's very actually impressive when we think about it. Yes, the language is endangered, but it's been almost 160 years, right? 160 years actually. And the language is still alive. Yes, 90% of the young generation, they don't speak it, but it still survived all that, repression, state oppression and all that. And the other study was published recently, actually, 2024. And in the study, I looked at how the policies impacted Circassian maintenance. I want to share some of my research questions I tackled with this article. So I wanted to find the answers to these questions. How have official language policies affected the maintenance and generational transfer of Circassian? And how the participants across ages and regions. So for this study, I actually recruited Circassian speakers from different parts of Turkey and from different age groups. I had people who were over 70, and I had younger people in their 30s. So I wanted to see their perspective on the situation of the language, the future of the language, basically what they heard from their parents about the language, and also that's why I wanted to have regional diversity and also in their ages, and also their views on the future of Circassian. I'll share briefly some of my findings before I talk about the AI project. So my first theme in the study was the linguistic oppression and prohibition of Circassian in schools. So this was an overarching theme in the study, and every single participant actually mentioned the huge role this had on their language maintenance. So this participant, he was 74 years old, mentioned that Circassian was banned, and students would get punished for speaking Circassian, and this was very interesting. So they formed this discipline committee in the school, right? And we're talking about elementary school. So kids like 7, 10, 11 years old kids. Imagine that there is this committee, discipline committee, and your job is to report students who spoke Circassian outside of the school to the teacher. So the school is an official setting, the language is Turkish, obviously it's banned, you can't speak it, but even outside of the school, if you say anything, if you speak Circassian while playing in your village, which is 100% Circassian village for instance, the next day you would be reported to the school teacher by some of your friends, and then you would get physically punished. So they would have these like language informants, right? And then the next day, the teacher, he mentioned that he experienced this. The teacher would condemn the students and physically punish them. So this is the environment. Another participant, 56 years old male, these are all pseudonyms, it's not their real name, I call it Aslan here. He mentioned that in elementary school, I felt alienated from my ethnic identity. Speaking Circassian was strictly forbidden, not just at school, but even outside, a similar story. And for Circassians, there's this game called gen. It's like a little, piece of bone from sheep's. It's basically pre-marble days. I'm sure you all played with marbles at one point or are familiar with it. So pre-marble days, Circassians would play gen. It's basically these like little bone piece because they're mostly from the villages. They all had animals, and they would play this game. But it was very unique Circassian game, and the teachers would even ban these games in these villages because this participant mentioned that gen was one of the few ways we could connect with our identity, but our Turkish teacher tried to ban it completely. Even now, decades later, I feel the same anxiety when I walk past that school in his village. We became different people there, disconnected from who we really were. And same participant mentioned that the Circassian language and identity created a feeling of illegality in us due to all the pressure and oppression. We always felt like we were involved in an illegal act when we spoke our language or expressed our identity in any way. So this is the schooling environment. Right? And then outside of the school, so this participant who actually was very active in Circassian associations across Turkey, they were publishing this magazine, Circassian magazine, and they were publishing these Circassian songs with lyrics in Circassian, right? But they had to remove the lyrics, he said, from the songs and publish only the musical notes because the lyrics were in Circassian. So, like, who cares about the note? Like, those notes don't mean anything without the lyrics. But because of the, the language ban and everything, in the overall society, they had to ban the lyrics. They had to remove the lyrics. So in 2002, Turkey started these EU talks, right? Which actually granted some rights to minority groups. But in society, in the dominant public, the language still, minority languages still are pretty stigmatized, right? So this participant said that he was working at a factory and there was a Circassian speaker there, a friend, and he talked to his friend while passing by, and a lady who worked there overheard them and said, "By speaking Circassian, you are being separatist." Separatism meant anything except Turkish at that time. So basically, language is seen as a threat, not just a threat, but basically separatist move, right? So you're not supposed to speak anything but Turkish in public. This was happening at a factory. So my final research question explored the perspectives of these participants, like what they thought about the future of Circassian. Yes, it's an endangered language. UNESCO labeled us as a endangered language, but I wanted their perspectives, and I'll share some of the responses here. So the first participant, Shamil, mentioned that if the government doesn't support it, all Circassian dialects, including Shapsa, Bjeduk, Kabardin, and Abzak, will unfortunately face the same consequence as Ubuk and will be buried in Anatolia. It was very powerful when I was doing this interview. It was even emotional when I was conducting this interview because it's rather like pessimistic, and there is no like state support really. Although after the 2002 EU talks, there are some rights right now. You can do elective Circassian courses in Turkish schools. You can take it, but there are a lot of administrative hurdles, right? So there has to be at least like 10 Circassian students, and they have to have a Circassian speaker teacher, which is hard to find, especially if you live in these big like major towns in Turkey. And the youngest participant in the study, Setenay, she mentioned that, unfortunately, I'm not hopeful. There is a linguistic freedom to some extent, but since the language has been oppressed for so long, it's very hard to awaken the desire in our people to learn their native language. And another participant, 46-year-old Jean-Berg, he mentioned that at this point, I think Circassian is almost a dead language. I don't believe that it can be maintained, even if people want to learn it. So these people are sharing these based on lived experiences, their own lived experiences, or their parents, right? So it's a, this last slide is a good segue to my new, the part I'm going to talk about now. So they were all like pessimistic and everything, and I conducted this study 2 years ago. But with the AI, with technology, with deep learning, large language models and everything, if you use technology for your own benefit, for maintaining the language, it can do wonders, right? So we started this project with some language activists and volunteers. It's a totally volunteer-based project. We use this platform by Mozilla. It's called Common Voice. So this is an open source initiative, and it builds inclusive voice recognition databases. And you can be a speaker of any language from anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter how many speakers your language has. Even if it's less than 1,000, you can have a platform and do these, create these data sets. So they can be used to train AI models, voice commands, and things like that. So it's a nonprofit project, and its world's largest open data set. They have 227 languages, and there are 100 languages right now. They're in that process of getting validated and posted on their platform. And it uses CC license. Basically, there's no restrictions or anything. It's not like Meta or Twitter or X. They don't have these license restrictions. So we have these big tech companies, right? Like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. They also collect voice data, right? We have Alexa, we have other platforms. If you use ChatGPT, you can use audio commands, and they also use your voice. But they don't release it. These are all, it becomes your own property, basically. You don't get a say in how it's used, but we see Mozilla's model as a democratization of data access. Basically, this the voice data, these data sets are used to do good to the public and for endangered languages. And we have Adiga, Western Circassian, and Kabardin, Eastern Circassian, on the platform now. So, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter how big your language is. You can be on this platform, and it's supporting all the low resource and endangered languages. And right now there are roughly around 7,000 languages worldwide, but the projections are that 45%, almost half of these languages are endangered and may go extinct within a century. It's really sad, but I'm going to show this real quick. So here is the platform, and you can see all the languages. There are so many languages here. Some of the languages, probably even heard of it. But these are endangered languages, and the activists of those languages, they go here and they record their voices, basically try to save their language, right? Create data sets, maybe linguists in the future, even if a language becomes extinct, linguists in the future, they can revive, study the language, the grammar, the rules and everything. And most importantly, you can maintain the language by, we live in this AI era now, right? It's growing like crazy, and we will use these voice commands and text to audio translations a lot more moving forward. But you can, there's Hungarian here, all the languages. Your language doesn't have to be endangered. Like they have English. Obviously, it's a lingua franca, it's spoken everywhere. But you can go and do recordings here, and then you see some here, some stuff here, validation progress and sentences. I'll talk about those my next slide. So how does this work? This Common Voice platform. Basically, the first step, we collect diverse voice data. It's a pretty straightforward process, actually. So the reason why we want to collect diverse voice data is because we don't want the AI to be biased towards one gender, one dialect, or the language spoken in one specific region, right? So we try to collect voices from different gender, age, dialect, accent, and style, and also different sentence types, right? It's not just a question, or it's not just commands. And then the second phase is training the AI model. So these are all large language models. And the first step, we give some examples. Then AI learns the patterns, and final step, we test and improve these. You can think of this as like, when you hear a language that's very unfamiliar to you, you don't know the language, but you can guess which language this might be. Like, if you hear, let's say, Chinese, you might be like, oh, this sounds like Chinese, right? AI is basically like the same. So with our voice, we are trying to introduce the language to AI so that it can recognize, and then it can be improved for future projects. Like, if you want to have like a smart home or something, and then you can use these like Alexa type platforms, or if you're using a GPS, you can use it in your native language. And then we test the performance, the validation in my previous slide. So you have these like really short like sentences, right? You read, let's say, today was a beautiful day, right? You read that in Circassian and record your voice, like 5 seconds. Then it goes to this data set, but before we can deploy that to the AI database, at least 2 people, native speakers of that language, they have to validate, and they have to say that, yes, this is the correct way to read this. If only one person votes yes, approves that recording, it doesn't go to the training data set. And if everything is acceptable, it can be deployed, but once it's deployed, you also have to constantly improve it. But there are some challenges. So bias from non-diverse data sets. If AI hears only male voice, obviously it's not going to understand female voices, right? Also, if it's just one region, the problem that we're facing with Circassian, since we live in a big diaspora, so Circassians living in Turkey, they have their own accents. And Circassians living in the North Caucasus of Russia, they have their own accents. Circassians in Jordan, they have their own accents. So we try to diversify the data set as much as possible. And Circassian is a very complex language too. We have 59 letters and 3 symbols, and some of the sounds, they're very hard, right? So we have to acknowledge that we are facing this uphill battle. And the major problem that we face with this study, 90% of Circassians from Turkey, maybe even more, they don't read or write with Cyrillic because we use Cyrillic alphabet. And Circassians in Turkey, they can be good speakers of the language, but they don't know how to read and write the language. So that's another problem. Also, if you just train the model with Circassian spoken in the North Caucasus, it won't recognize the language spoken in Turkey or Jordan. And also, compared to English or Turkish, we will need a lot more data to train the model. So it's hard to learn many sounds. It's also very late in culture. Many can't read, write Cyrillic. Also, diaspora effects. Language mostly frozen 150 years ago. We don't add new things. Basically, use what those people brought to Turkey with them, and just we don't. It's not like a language that's very active. You add new vocabularies and everything because it's not really used in the public. So, and another problem is code switching. So, code switching is the concept where you mix 2 languages, at the same time. So, Circassians are at least bilingual, I can say. I guess, the older generation, unfortunately, the younger generation, if they're born in Jordan, Turkey, they may be just monolingual, speaking the dominant Turkish or Arabic language. But especially for older people, they code switch a lot. So they start the sentence in Circassian and they throw a few Turkish words in there. So they switch between languages, and that becomes problematic when you train AI in Circassian too, because then it's going to hear multiple languages, and that's not what we really aim at this project. So with this project, we have read speech and spontaneous speech. So for the first part, we create this text corpus. We add sentences, written sentences, like short sentences like I mentioned. How was the weather today? Do you go to school? Like these basic daily sentences that we use. And then in the text corpus, native speakers of the language from Nalchik, from the Caucasus, Jordan, different parts, they validate that and say that yes, this is written in a correct form, it's grammatically correct. And then we transfer those to the voice corpus. Basically, then they become live and people start reading those on the platform. They read it aloud and record it, and at least 2 people validate those, right? But lately we started this spontaneous speech project, which is very exciting because our problem, especially in Turkey, a lot of people they can speak the language, but they don't know how to read or write with Cyrillic, right? But with the spontaneous speech, so the order is reversed. So we start with the voice corpus first. So they get questions, around like 100 questions, very basic. Tell me about your day today. And they start recording their response in Circassian. So they don't really have to know how to read and write Circassian, even though this question will be shown to them in Cyrillic. But we also edit with the spontaneous, the Latin version. So in Turkey, a lot of people, they can read the language with Latin letters, but not Cyrillic. So we edit that so that we could reach the older generation who can't read or write, but they're good speakers of the language, right? Once we do that, then we have transcriptions and the same process, validating or editing. So the impact and possibilities with this project. So we can create language learning apps. There are actually some apps that are emerging in their beta phases. They're training some apps now, and there can be some AI-powered translation. Just basically Google Translate, your language can be there if you create the data set that's large enough and trained with diverse voice data set. It can be there too. Media preservation and also increased visibility and legitimacy. So this is from 2 days ago, our progress. So Kabardin and Adike. So we have speakers from all the diaspora countries, from America, Jordan, Syria, Israel, Turkey, and the Caucasus. So we had 53 hours, like 6 months or so ago. We had almost 0, so it's a good progress. We started some campaigns, social media campaigns, try to recruit some volunteers who can speak the language. Right now we have 141 speakers who are actively recording their voice and validating. And we have really high validation progress, 97%, and we're close to 15,000 sentences. So it's a good progress, but with AI and training these language models, it's a long process. So we have some long-term goals. We started the social media campaigns, and our goal is to hit 100 hours by the end of this year. And hopefully we'll recruit some more volunteers and move on with this project. All right, that's all that I have for this session. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's Circassian. And I want to thank specifically to our computer engineer, the engine behind this whole project. Bülent Özden, he was the project coordinator for this project and spent countless hours training us, training other volunteers. And if you are interested in any of the references, I can share my references with you too. But thanks for listening. All right, so any questions, or do we have time for questions, or after his session?
We can have.
I don't know, you're the moderator.